Wow, that's good.
The technology is getting more advanced, or less advanced. So it's working. Okay, Erev Tov. So we'll talk a little bit about Sfirat HaOmer tonight. I'm not going to talk about any of the controversial topics of Sfirat HaOmer. We'll keep that for next week. But just in general, so the halachot, as we know, we are counting from Pesach through to Shavuot, counting the 49 days. Sheva Shabbatot Temimot Tiyena, says the Torah. And the question always comes up, right? What happens if somebody forgets? Somebody forgets one of the days to count, right? Can you continue? Should you continue counting with a bracha, without a bracha? You forget during the day, you forget at night, during the day, etc. So questions which are discussed, which come up every year. Obviously, the easiest way to make sure that you won't forget is just make sure you daven Maariv with a minyan every night, and you will remember to count. But nonetheless, sometimes it's not possible. Or if we're doing early Shabbos, right? This is where many people might forget on Friday night. We daven when it's still Mibod Yom, and therefore you would have to count later, etc. There are lots of apps and things to remind people to count. Obviously on Shabbat that would not be permissible to use, so that wouldn't help either. So assuming somebody forgot to count one of the days, the first question I was going to discuss is, if you forgot at night and you then remembered the next day, could you still fulfill the mitzvah of counting Sfirat HaOmer during the day, right, with a bracha? That's the question. Here we have a very interesting machloket rishonim regarding this point. Because first of all, we know the time for counting Sfirah is at night. It's based on two factors. Factor number one is counting the Omer. Sfirat HaOmer is related to the Ktsirat HaOmer, which took place in the times of the Beit HaMikdash. Right, the day after Pesach, there would be a harvesting of the first Omer, is a measurement of barley, which would that would be done, and from that Ktsirat HaOmer takes place, ideally at least, at night. We have two different Mishnayot which seem to contradict one another as to whether it would be kasher b'diavad to do the Ktsirat HaOmer during the daytime or not. Mishnah Menachot seems to tell us that, that the Ktsirat HaOmer should be done at night, but if it was done during the day, it would be kasher. And based on that, we would think that the same thing would apply to Sfirat HaOmer. You should count at night. You forgot to count at night. Count the next day with a bracha, and that should be fine based on that. However, from the Mishnah and Megillah and the sugya over there, it seems to imply that Ktsirat HaOmer could only take place at night and cannot take place in the day. So there may be a machloket between the two Gemarot. How do we resolve that? How do we paskin? That is one discussion that is brought in the poskim. But you can see already there that that is one reason to say certainly the katchila one should not be counting during the day. But more than that, the Sharat Tziyun brings it here in the Mishnah Berurah. He brings in the Sharat Tziyun. Normally we have the page of the Mishnah Berurah. So we have the Shulchan Aruch. We have the Mishnah Berurah, which is the main commentary, which the Chofetz Chaim wrote, explaining the different dinim of the that are in the Shulchan Aruch. We have next to that the Biur Halacha, which is sometimes there's goes deeper into a sugya, bringing more rishonim, doing more sort of analysis of that question. And then at the bottom is the Sharat Tziyun as well. All three were written together by the Chofetz Chaim. Usually the Sharat Tziyun is very, very short. It just gives the Marei Makom, tells you which Rishon or which Achron held like this. Sometimes he goes in a little bit more detail, and he elaborates a little bit more in the Sharat Tziyun as well. So over here, he brings the whole sugya in the Sharat Tziyun, talks about how he quotes the Rambam, where for the Rambam talks about the Ktsirat HaOmer. It says Niktsar Bayom Kasher. In other words, that b'diavad, if it was done during the day, that would be okay. And he says Yadua derachmana talas sfira b'ktsira, that the Sfirat HaOmer we learn out based on the Ktsirat HaOmer. However, he says Onam yesh lidchot k'mo shekatvu Tosfot, and he brings the other svara, which is to say the following: that even if we say that the Ktsirat HaOmer was kosher during the day, was valid during the day, there may still be a reason to say that when it comes to Sfirat HaOmer, when it comes to counting, we can only count at night and not during the day. What is the reason? And it's based on that pasuk. We'll see three different meanings, how we understand those words. Shabbatot temimot tihiyana. Right? The word is, it has to be, when you count the Omer, it has to be temimot, it has to be complete, a complete counting. Now, what does this complete mean? We'll see there are at least three different interpretations. So one is that you could say temimot goes on each day. Each day that you count has to be tamim, has to be complete. Meaning to count the entire unit of the day, you have to start from one night, the night before, until the following night. That is the entire period. That includes the 24 hours. This is why, as well, when it comes to Shavuot, the minhag is that although on Shabbat and on Yom Tov, sometimes Maariv we daven a little bit earlier. On Shavuot night we wait. We wait until nightfall before we daven, before we begin davening Maariv, so that we have counted Sheva Shabbatot Tamimot. Right? This becomes very, very problematic in certain places in the world. I've just come back from England, as you know, where it gets late, where you have Shavuot over there. It gets dark very, very, very late. You're going to start davening only at 10 o'clock at night, whatever it is. Are you still going to be able to have? And again, it's not a trivial question, because that means if you postpone the davening, what happens to the meal? Right? What happens to Simchat Yom Tov? What happens to that? What happens to Tikkun El Shavuot? I mean, what's that? Make Aliyah. That's always a good option. But in any event, so the poskim discuss over there. But going back to what we're saying now, so Tosfot understands that Tamimot relates to each day, each component, each unit of a day in and of itself. And therefore, says Tosfot, if you did not count at night, you cannot count during the day. You've lost it. The Bahag, there are two very interesting machlokot we find, two famous machlokot between Tosfot and the Bahag. The Bahag, the Baal Halachot Gedolot, another one of the Rishonim. So the Bahag says, if you did not count at night, you can count during the day. He says you can count during the day with the bracha. So that is the machloket Rishonim. So out of deference to Tosfot and the other Rishonim, what we say in the Shulchan Aruch says that if one forgot to count at night, says the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Taf Peitet, so if Zayin, Shachach velo birech kol halayla, a person forgot and did not say the bracha, did not count at night. It says kol halayla, meaning the entire night would still be kasher for the bracha. So ispor bayom belo bracha. So count the following day without a bracha. And says the Mishnah Berurah explains the yesh lachush the data poskim the ein zman sfira ela balayla. Right, we're worried about those poskim, and there are many who say, many Rishonim say you can only count at night. You cannot count during the day. And if you were to count during the day to say the bracha, it may be a bracha levatala. So in order that we don't get into the concern of a bracha levatala, you don't say a bracha during the day, but you would still count. You don't lose anything by counting.
What happens if you count? Say on Wednesday, you count Thursday by mistake.
Okay, so that's also a very interesting question. If you count the wrong day by mistake, the answer is if you counted the wrong day, it's considered as if you haven't counted. What the Shulchan Aruch discusses as well is what if you can't remember what you counted? You come to Maariv, and the Chazan says the bracha, and he says there, and he counts day 13 or whatever it is, and you say, wait a minute, yesterday I counted 11, or did I count 11, or did I count 12? I got to remember. So then you have a suffix, you might have a sfeik. We'll see if we get to that. But let's first deal with the case where we know that we forgot. Okay, so that is the case if one didn't count at night and one counted during the day. What if one forgot completely during the day as well? So one didn't count at night, you didn't count during the day, you forgot about it, you come to Maariv the next night, Chazan says the bracha, you say, oops, yesterday I know I didn't count. So can you, what?
No cheesecake.
No cheesecake. Okay, so. What if you made earlier and you still forgot? Then you've got a problem. Okay, so here we find another machloket between the Bahag and Tosfot, and in this case it's reversed. Right? Remember the previous case that I mentioned. If you about counting during the day, Bahag said you can count during the day with the bracha. Tosfot said no. Here we find the exact opposite spot. Says the Bahag. And this is the famous Shita of the Bahag. It's more or less a dat yachid amongst the Rishonim, but for whatever reason it is taken into account very, very strongly in halacha. Maybe because of the chashash, because of the concern of a bracha levatala. Says Bahag, when you count the days of Sfrat Omer, all 49 days. Now this he doesn't say explicitly. This is how many understand it. Many understand, and it's often quoted as saying that it's all one mitzvah. That is all one mitzvah of counting. We'll come back to that point. But and therefore, if you missed one of the days, you can't carry on counting because you've only done part of the mitzvah, and you can't carry on saying the bracha. What he says, that's how it's explained often. What he says explicitly is, you missed a day, don't count the next day. That's what the Bahag says. As I say, many explain that it's because it's all part of one mitzvah, and you've missed part of it, you can no longer continue. The obvious difficulty with this, and Tosfot brings this opinion of Bahag, and the words that Tosfot uses, he says, Teima Gdola. This is very, very puzzling. I don't understand this opinion of the Bahag El. Why? Because if you say that it's all part of one mitzvah, well, we say 49 brachot. Each day we say a different bracha. If each day is an independent mitzvah of itself, I understand why every day it's an independent mitzvah. Today's mitzvah is to count today, and therefore I say the bracha and I count. But if it's all part of one mitzvah, right? That would make sense if we said the first day that you count, you say the bracha, and each day you continue counting, you carry on. That's what we would think. That's what we think, but that's not our practice. The practice is each day we say a bracha. For example, I'll give you an example of a mitzvah which continues where we only say a bracha once. We've just had Pesach. So when we do b'dikat chametz, right, the night before Pesach, everybody does b'dikat chametz, and you said the bracha. What bracha do we say? We say we don't say al b'dikat chametz. The bracha is al biur chametz. Why? Because there are two parts of the mitzvah. The mitzvah begins with the b'dika, with the search, but you're not searching for the sake of searching itself. You're searching for the sake of destroying, which you do the next morning. So you begin, part A of the mitzvah is at night, the b'dika. Part B is in the morning with the biur. But you only say the bracha once at the beginning because it's all part of the same mitzvah. It's all part of the same mitzvah. So we say al biur chametz at the beginning. We don't say al biur chametz at night and then say al biur chametz again in the morning. If Sfirat HaOmer is one long mitzvah, then you would think that you would just say the bracha once and that's it. But we don't. We say the bracha each day, each night. And so that would seem to be that each night would be its own mitzvah. So why then does the Bahag say that if you miss the day, you can't continue counting? By the way, the other Rishonim, Tosfot, Rosh, many of the other Rishonim say, you missed the day, but the next day is a new day. It's a new mitzvah. You say the bracha and you count, right? In the same way, a person puts on tefillin, a person for whatever reason was unable to put on tefillin shel yad, you say the bracha on tefillin shel rosh, or vice versa. If you for whatever reason, a person missed the day of putting on tefillin. So we don't say the next day, well, you missed the day, you can't say the bracha. It's a new day, it's a new mitzvah. So why is it? So Bahag says the following. What he does say, we go back to this idea of tmimot. Now notice Tosfot understood the word tmimot relating to each day in and of itself. And therefore Tosfot said, if you miss, for one day, if you're counting in the day instead of in the night, that's no longer a fulfillment of tmimot for that day. And you can no longer count, you no longer say a bracha. Bahag says no, it says tmimot, I understand, not relating to each day in and of itself, but it's relating to Sheva Shabbatot tmimot, so the entire 7-week period. And therefore, what does tmimot mean? It means you count it every day. So if you missed one of the days, you missed counting one of the days, it's no longer tmimot, and you can no longer fulfill that. You can no longer say the bracha, and you could no longer count. That is the opinion of the Bahag, and we could explain further. We could say each day is its own mitzvah. Each day is its own mitzvah. But what's the mitzvah is that we're counting. We're counting from 1 to 49. There's only one way to count from 1 to 49. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If you missed a day, a person missed day 4, let's say, for example. So the next day, you can't count day 5 because you're going from 3 to 5. You missed the day, you missed counting. It's independent mitzvah, but each day is building on from the previous day. That's why Bahag would say that you cannot, this is another explanation, why you cannot count if you missed the day. How would Tosfot answer? So Tosfot would say, presumably, you missed the day, but that day still happened. It was still there, so you still carry on counting the next day. So this is the machloket we have. So how do we pass it? How do we pass it in this? Says the Shulchan Aruch, Im shachach levarech bechad hayamim, somebody forgot to count one of the days, ben yom rishon, ben misha yamim, doesn't matter if it's the first day or the last day, sofer b'shal yamim belo bracha. You should count the rest of the days without a bracha. Again, out of def, because according to most Rishonim, you can still count, you could still say a bracha. But again, we're worried about bracha levatala, and therefore out of deference to the opinion of Bahag, who says you cannot, we stop saying a bracha if we forgot to count one day, but you should still count. By the way, this is something that many people forget, and it gets lost. It's not that, sometimes somebody forgot to count one of the days of Yom. It could be 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, it doesn't matter. Forgot to count, and then they stop counting the rest of the days. They say, I'm out. I stopped counting. That's completely incorrect. That's against the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says that if you missed a day, so you can no longer say the bracha, but you still fulfill the mitzvah by counting each day afterwards. So what should you do? If you missed a day and you now can no longer say the bracha, you should try and be in shul. You should try and hear from the chazan or the rav or whoever it is that is saying the bracha, just like in any other mitzvah. You hear the bracha from somebody else, you answer amen, and then you can continue counting. But a person should continue counting, and even if they had missed a day. So there's one more thing here, just putting these two ideas together, which the Trumat Hadeshen says the following. It says somebody forgot to count at night, but then they counted during the day. We said, if you remember during the day, so count during the day without a bracha. But if you did that, you can then continue counting the next night with a bracha. And we say because mima nafshach. We say if the halacha goes like the bahag, right, that you can count that you can't count if you missed a day. Well, you didn't miss a day because you counted during the day instead of at night. And therefore you can continue counting. If the halacha is like Tosfot, that you can't count during the day, okay, so you can't count during the day, but you can continue the next night, even if you missed a day. So mima nafshach, if you've forgotten at night and you've said during the day without a bracha, then one could continue counting the rest of the sfera with a bracha. But again, if one missed a day completely, one should still endeavor to continue counting, but only one does not say a bracha. Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha אומר, צעק הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל, לפיכך בא להם תורה מצוות, שני מעדני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיר